Aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort.
I'm putting that on my mirror forever.
I promise you, if your morning's hard, your day will be easy. Promise you that.
Welcome to the Excellence Project, where we explore excellence, entrepreneurship, and artistry in its many, many forms. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, that you subscribe and you share. In today's conversation, we have human biologist Gary Brecka, an anti-aging expert. We talk about all things anti-aging, health, longevity, energy. I think you're going to love the conversation. And with no further ado, let's get into our conversation with Gary Brecka. Gary Brecka.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm doing amazing.
So I've heard different names for you. And is the most accurate one a human biologist?
Human biologist, yes.
Human biologist and like lead expert for 10X Health.
Yes, I'm the lead human biologist for 10X Health. I'm a co-founder of 10X Health.
Okay. And what you've done is so interesting. And yeah, I've watched some of the other content that you put out. You're kind of famously promoted almost by Dana White.
Oh, yeah.
I saw Dana White's testimonial, and that's part of the reason why I contacted you in the first place. And, you know, because Dana White was talking about how you really helped change his life.
Right.
Talk about that experience. What did you do for Dana White?
Well, you know, what we did for Dana was what we do for, you know, any other patient. But, you know, the first thing we have to understand about this journey towards optimal health is that we need data, right? Most people, when they want to sleep better or have a better response to exercise or more waking energy or improve their, you know, the depth of their sleep, they just ask their spouse or their friend or even their doctor or, you know, their neighbor or their workout buddy, you know, what works for you. And so it leads us to supplement for the sake of supplementing. And it leads us to very often start taking prescription medication without any real data. You know, it's like we have an income statement, a balance sheet, a P&L for our business, but we don't really have one for our bodies. And so the first thing we did was just get some data. We got blood work on Dana, and we got a genetic test. I'm a huge fan of genetic testing because we can look at actionable genes in the human body, meaning we can look at genes that are responsible for converting raw material in the human body into the usable form. You see, there's not a single compound known to mankind, not one, that enters the human body that's used in the form that we put it in. Everything that enters our body has to go through a process of being converted into the usable form. If you can't make this conversion, you have a deficiency. And it's that deficiency that leads to some of the most common ailments. Things like high blood pressure, weight gain, water retention, poor response to exercise, poor sleep, what we think are allergies, gastrointestinal upset, you know, diarrhea, constipation, you know, irritability, cramping, and then things that we consider to be mental conditions like ADD, ADHD, OCD. All of these conditions are in many cases deficiencies in the human body. So in Dana's case, we got some blood work, we got some gene testing. At the time, he's been very public about his medical records. So at the time, he was on 4 or 5 different prescription medications, 2 or 3 of them for blood pressure control. And what we realized was his body was deficient in certain very important raw materials. In his case, something called trimethylglycine, something called methylfolate, and he had very poor blood sugar control. You know, he was almost a type 2 diabetic. He had very high cholesterol, very high triglycerides, and he had a very, very high inflammatory marker called homocysteine. And what we did was we used a basic amino acid to lower the level of this inflammatory compound. And we fixed the nutrient deficiencies in his body. We balanced his hormones. And for a period of time, I put him on a very strict keto diet. Which was kind of like twisted his head in a knot when, you know, I said, you have a life-threatening level of fat in your blood. And the way that I'm going to get the fat down in your blood is I'm going to put you on a high-fat diet.
But before we get into keto, I want to talk about this one part of what he talked about. He said somebody bought you as doing a consulting thing for him as a gift.
Yes.
It's like a birthday present or
Yep.
something for a guy who has everything. He's very successful, very wealthy guy.
Right.
And part of the pitch that he heard was that you could accurately predict within a month here or there how long a person had to live.
That's right.
And when I heard that, I'm like, what?
Everybody's has the same reaction.
Dude, like so I'll get to it in a second, but I want to know, Dana asked you to do that for him.
He did. Yeah. That was how we first met. He said, I want you to do my life expectancy.
Life
Tell me
expectancy.
How long I have to live.
So he was how old when he started with you?
So this is going back about a year.
About a year. So how old was he at the time?
52.
52. So how long did you give him?
He had 10.4 years.
10.4 years. So he
10.4
was going to
years.
last at like 62 or 63.
Yep.
And then it was going to be done.
10 years and 10 years
Now,
and about 3 months.
I know you've taken some flack for that.
Oh, I take a lot of
A
flack.
lot of
for
people
that.
saying, "Oh, this is monkey business. This is pseudoscience. This is not real."
Right.
Talk about your credentials in doing that, your experience in doing that, and talk about the science behind it and how accurate that actually really is.
Well, I mean, from a training perspective, my undergraduate degrees are in biology. My postgraduate degrees are in human biology and neuroscience. But for 20 years, I worked for the insurance industry in a specialized area of life insurance. And if we got 5 years of medical records on you and 5 years of demographic data, we could tell the insurance company how long you had to live to the month. And it is some of the most accurate science in the world. In fact, the new variable basic tables on mortality are based on a lot of the research that came from this industry. And, when we talk about predicting mortality to the month, remember that life insurance companies have some of the most voluminous databases in the world. Hundreds of millions of lives, and they have information that no other database has. I mean, if you look at the medical community and research foundations and universities and even the CDC and the FDA, the information that insurance companies have that nobody else has as voluminous is they know the day, the date, the time, the location, and the cause of death for anybody that they have insured. Right? On life insurance. And not only do they know the day, date, time, location, and cause of death, but they also know all of the medications that person was on. They know their family history. They know their demographic data. They know their financial history. They have intimate knowledge of their medical records. And in fact, usually before the policy was issued, they even did their own blood testing. So they didn't just put that person on a mortality curve, like an actuarial curve. They were able to drill in on their specific mortality because they know liver enzymes and kidney poison levels and this level of anemia at this age and this history of smoking and this genetic predisposition, that all of these conditions, which are called mortality factors, put into the same body, combined with something called comorbidity factors, led to this causality of death. And if you add this pharmaceutical, it accelerates. If you add this pharmaceutical, it elongates. And so that data of knowing the date of expiration, if you will, on so many lives and triangulating that back into the medical record is how you become so accurate with your predictions. And if you want to know how accurate insurance companies are, just look at what happened in the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. We had, 364 banks fail? Not a single life insurance company failed. Not one. Right? I mean, we're going through the 16th money-centered bank now that they said is in financial trouble after the Silicon Valley Bank. You haven't heard that from one life insurance company. In fact, had it not been for the life insurance division of AIG, the credit derivatives side of the business would have sucked the entire company under. And so these are some of the most solvent and profitable and stable institutions in the world. And what do? They take risk that no other financial institution takes. No angel investor, no venture capital firm, no hedge fund, no investor of any sort would ever put that kind of risk on a single variable. I mean, when a life insurance company puts 25 million or 50 million or 75 or 100 million, which was very common in my industry, of risk on one life, they're betting on one variable. How many more months does this person have left on earth? And so if you really follow life insurance trends and mortality trends, you'll find out where the real science is going. So for example, watch what happens to the pricing on vaccinated, boosted, double boosted, triple boosted patients. Watch what happens to the table ratings on those patients, and to the point where they
You believe it's going to shorten?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, as you add vaccines and add boosters, you will become further and further and further table rated because they have the data. I mean, they were onto the opioid crisis long before.
They won't admit that probably.
Well,
publicly.
they're not. They're certainly not going to publicly admit that. But have two 55-year-old males apply for the same life insurance policy with virtually identical blood work, virtually identical genetic histories and financial circumstances. One's going to be rated table 3. One's going to get standard insurance, and the major variable is going to be
What's table 3 versus standard?
Table 3 is a table rating, means it's a more expensive level of insurance versus a cheaper level of insurance. It's very likely that you'll start to see those table ratings increase.
So somebody smokes, somebody drinks alcohol, somebody has high blood sugar.
Right.
Those are all factors.
Yeah. What we call morbidity factors, right? So if you're morbidly obese, you get a debit. If you have type 2 diabetes, you get a debit. If you have hypertension, you get a debit. But if you're a morbidly obese, hypertensive, diabetic, now you put all these into the same body. We know that this is not a 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It's 1 + 1 + 1 = 10. Right? These are called comorbidity factors, and they're cumulative. And so they accelerate mortality. We know things like the trajectory of certain pharmaceuticals, right? I mean, we know that modern medicine, according to a 2018 Johns Hopkins study and Harvard study, that modern medicine is the practice of medicine, medical error, is the 3rd leading cause of death in America. So it's astounding when you think that modern medicine and medical error is the 3rd leading cause of death. I mean, only cancer and cardiovascular disease kill more people than modern medicine. They kill more people than morbid obesity and diabetes combined.
So I guess what you're saying is the actual. Are you saying doctors or big pharma?
Well, I'm saying modern medicine, which includes physicians and big pharma, but it's driven, a lot of it's driven.
I know there's a lot of distrust about modern medicine.
Well, I mean, look at the industry of disease. I mean, in the United States, diabetes alone, type 2 diabetes, is a $110 billion annual industry. So if you think there's boardroom meetings going on right now to try to put that out of business, you're crazy. And for a long period of time, I used to say, well, if you were a client of mine and you said, Gary, write me a diet that would guarantee I would get diabetes, I used to take you right to the American Diabetic Association website and show you dietary guidelines for people that can't regulate blood sugar. But my whole point is not to attack modern medicine. My point is that we know that that medical error, misdiagnoses is common. What insurance companies knew was the consequences for these misdiagnoses. So for example, if you have a clinical deficiency in the vitamin D3, if you have a clinical deficiency in D3 for long enough, you will present with rheumatoid arthritis-like symptoms. Now, you don't have rheumatoid arthritis, but you have the very same symptoms. You're stiff and achy when you wake up in the morning. The soles of your feet and your ankles hurt when you get out of bed first thing in the morning. You get stiff across the hips and shoulders, and eventually it becomes hard to make a fist. If you walk into the wrong doctor's office and start to explain that symptomology, the doctor's going to go, you know what, Eric, you got rheumatoid arthritis. I'm going to hit you with some high-dose prednisone. I'm going to start you on something called a corticosteroid. And initially, these things are anti-inflammatory, but we knew in the life insurance industry that if you started corticosteroids, you had 6 years and 1 day until you were having a joint replacement. So that meant that I would artificially, if you were a 60-year-old male, I would artificially advance your age 6 years to age 66. I would schedule the joint replacement, right? Even though you're only 60, I would schedule it for your 66th birthday. And then I would begin to reduce what was called your ambulatory profile, how well you ambulate, how well you move. And as I reduced your mobility, I would bring in all the diseases that exacerbate with reduced mobility. And so as I bring in diseases that would exacerbate with reduced mobility, I could not only predict the onset of, but the severity of disease and how quickly you would succumb to it. So if you think about a scenario where somebody's body is just deficient in a basic raw material, vitamin D3, the sunshine vitamin, the only vitamin human beings can make on our own, right? Arguably the single most important compound in the human body. You deplete this nutrient from human beings, they present with a condition they don't have. They're diagnosed with a disease that they do not have. They're put on a medication that's not required, which causes them to have a joint replacement that they never needed, which reduces their ability to be mobile, which brought diseases forward that they never would have had. And they end up succumbing to a disease early because of a misdiagnosis of a single missing raw material in the human
Crazy.
body.
So how long did you do this work, this insurance work?
A little over 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
So over 20 years, you were basically telling the insurance companies, this person has, on average, if they don't make any changes, right? If they continue on this path.
Yep. And we would rarely assume that they would change.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's because people don't change much.
No.
So assume that they don't change. They're going to expire on such and such a day or such and such a year.
Mm-hmm.
And you can set your premiums based upon that.
Yes.
And if they changed for the worse, that's going to shorten that number.
Right.
If they change for the better, it's going to extend that number.
Yeah, there was even something that were called mortality factors, which was the statistical chance that they would die before the mean.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, so if a pool of 1,000 lives was put into a mortality prediction and it said, okay, this person's life expectancy is 60 months. That didn't mean that they were going to die in 60 months. That meant that they had an equal chance of being alive and an equal chance of being dead at month 60. Now, what determined whether or not they were on the left or right-hand side of that curve was something called a mortality factor. This mortality factor would bring in all of these comorbidities and other factors that we would find in their medical records and in their blood work. And it would say they have a much higher chance of being of passing before, we call it maturing before that 60-month date.
Maturing. That's such a nice word.
Yeah, we never use the term.
Yeah, you're going to mature. Yeah, you're going to mature off the planet.
But what's super interesting was that I always say if I could boil my entire career down to a single sentence, all 22 years of doing this type of research, it would be that the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. And by that, I mean, the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. We did not find a single disease etiological pathway that did not have its roots in a lack of oxygen or was not exacerbated by oxygen, including all forms of cancer, early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, all kinds of neuropathologies, autoimmune disease, arthritis, gut issues, all kinds of allergies.
So what you're saying, so I understand, is lack of oxygen is very, very bad. And the more oxygenated you can be as a human being, it's very, very good.
The more efficient you are at moving oxygen around the body, the better off you are.
So how does somebody increase? Well, hold on. I'm going to get, I have so many questions.
Yeah.
I want to get back to Dana for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Because you worked with him. How long you worked with him now? About a year?
About a year. A little over a year.
So what did you do to his, what did you call it? Maturing.
Yeah. Mortality.
His estimated life expectancy over the course of the time that you worked with him.
So when we looked at it the second time, it was more than 17 and a half years longer.
17 and a half years on top of 10?
On top of 10. So it went from 10.
So you went from 10 to 27?
27.4.
27.4 from 10.4.
That's right. Now, and this is because if you look at the mortality factor,
and you said people don't change.
People rarely change.
People rarely change, but he did.
Switch like I've never seen. He said, I said, Dana, if you do
you
everything that we
you scared him a little bit with the 10 years?
I scared him a little bit with the 10 years.
Yeah. Who wants to have all the money and then be gone?
That's what he said. I'm trying to time my exit so that I spend all my money. So I'm just kind of, sliding out. Fading out. I don't want to leave too much behind, but I don't want to take too much with me. And we had a very frank discussion because, I was able to tell him some things about himself that he hadn't even shared with his wife. He hadn't shared with, the people very close to him.
What could you tell by this that how, I know you've looked at a lot of different people as a human biologist in the insurance business and also in the kind of what I would call the repair business. I mean, or to help people change to a new trajectory.
Yep.
What could you tell that quickly about a person and to be able to give them a new path to take them from 10 years to 27?
Well, you start by telling them basic things like, look, I can see that you wake up sore and achy in the morning, like you had a workout the night before when you haven't. I bet it really bothers you that the soles of your feet and your ankles hurt when you get out of bed just to walk to the bathroom and take your first piss. And then you start to get more and more specific. I bet it really bothers you that this level of brain fog that you're struggling with has gotten worse and worse. You get a great idea in the bedroom. You walk to the kitchen. You wonder what the heck you're doing in the kitchen. You've noticed over the last 12 to 18 months that your libido has left the building. You don't really know why. You're attracted to your spouse. You love your spouse, but you have no arousal. And lately, you've been in a serious mood funk, probably for the better part of a year and a half. And I call it mood numbness, where the peaks and valleys of mood disappear. When the range of mood starts to flatten, you don't get really, really happy. You don't get really, really, really upset. You're just kind of, eh. And as that mood flattens and the brain fog increases and the overall stiffness and achiness happens, then what starts to happen to sleep is you lay down to go to bed at night to go to sleep, but your mind keeps you awake, right? You're tired, but your mind is awake because as your environment quiets, if you don't control catecholamines, the mind wakes up. And then I started catecholamines, fight or flight neurotransmitters. It's a category of neurotransmitters that actually wakes the mind up. And they're actually present when you're having a flight or flight. These are things that we call adrenaline, dopamine, ephedrine, norepinephrine, the same kind of neurotransmitters that flood the brain in a fight or flight type of situation can flood the brain at night without the presence of a fear. And you can see this on their genetic testing. And then you look at hormone balance, and when hormones are low, you see that red blood cell and hemoglobin levels are low. And this is your oxygen transport, right? So you know that this person is tired. They don't recover well. But the interesting thing about people with low red blood cell and hemoglobin levels is they're exhausted, but they can't sleep. And you would think it would be the opposite. Why do people that are the most exhausted sleep the worst? Well, because they're both related to the same thing. They're mild hypoxia. It's low oxygen. Why are you tired? Because you have low blood oxygen. If you have anemia, you're tired all the time. If you have anemia, why can't you sleep? Because when you lay down to go to bed at night and you start to fall asleep and your respiration rate starts to fall, your blood oxygen starts to fall. As your blood oxygen falls and it gets to a certain level, your brain panics and wakes you up by pulsing cortisol. So if you look at somebody that's really exhausted during the day, when they sleep, they'll look like a bouncing rubber ball going down the hallway. And the reason why they look like a bouncing rubber ball and they can't get into a deep sleep is because their brain is trying to save their life. And it is keeping them from a deep sleep. And often they'll go to their doctor and they'll take some really powerful sleep medication or, the tranquilizing or sedative. And they'll wake up the next morning and go, man, I hate taking Tylenol PM because it's still in my system the next day. It's actually not in your system the next day. That drug's been out of your system for hours. You're feeling the effects of having suffocated for 6 hours because you blindfolded the brain from being able to see your level of blood oxygen so it didn't wake you up. And now you suffocated for 6 hours. And the longer that goes on, the more you exacerbate these issues. So most people didn't know what was going wrong in their blood. We would see that people had anemia for years and years and years and years. And the doctors would treat them with the same treatment they do for anemia all the time: B12, folic acid, and iron. Well, 44% of the population can't even process folic acid. They have a gene mutation that doesn't allow them to convert folic acid into the usable form. So folic acid, by the way, is a totally man-made chemical. You can't find it anywhere on the surface of the earth. It's found in the cheapest supplements and the cheapest products, companies that really are not concerned about the absorption.
When you say you can't find it anywhere on earth, but it exists. So
it doesn't exist anywhere on the surface of the earth naturally in nature.
Naturally.
You can't find it anywhere naturally in nature. I apologize for that. Okay. You can find it in laboratories. We make folic acid in the laboratory. It's totally synthetic. We assume that folic acid, when we put it into human beings, it is going to work like folate. But that's absolutely patently false because 44% of the population has a gene mutation that does not allow them to make this conversion. So we use folic acid because it's cheap. Methylfolate and true folates, which all human beings can use, are a little more expensive. That's why you see a lot of cheap supplement companies will use cyanide-based forms of B12, like cyanocobalamin, instead of using natural forms of B12, like methylcobalamin or adenosylcobalamin or hydroxycobalamin.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Sorry.
There's so many terms.
Sorry, I get way down the road on that. Your listeners are probably
completely lost.
Passing out.
I'm completely lost.
Passing out.
Let me come back to.
If you don't, I'm a scientist, man. If you don't stop me,
let me ask you. No, it's all great. But let me ask you this: is the foundation of what you do the increase in oxygen and the decrease of inflammation?
Yes, decreasing, inflammation. I mean, this was the other thing that we noticed in the mortality space was that the leading reasons why people were living shorter lives and less healthy lives, why they had shorter lifespans and health spans, were what I call modifiable risk factors. This is why I left the industry, because eventually I realized that there was human beings on the other side of these spreadsheets. And I could not separate myself from the fact that it wasn't data any longer. And I said,
and you couldn't really help them. You weren't allowed to.
I was not allowed to have any contact with the patient, any contact with the treating physician, even if I saw life-threatening drug interactions. I could not contact the patient. And I said, how many more days or weeks or months or years am I going to spend predicting how soon people are going to die? And when am I going to start spending the balance of my lifetime helping people live healthier, happier, longer lives? And that was the day that I left the industry. I resigned from the industry. And I actually came home and told my fiance at the time, who's now my wife, Sage, I said, babe, I quit my job. And I want to start a wellness franchise. And I want to take all of this information that I've learned in the last 2.5 years, and I want to push it back out to humanity. And I want to make a real difference. And I want to change the face of humanity by helping people live healthier, happier, longer lives. And I used to get a lot of flack from my partners because they're like, hey, Gary, you get on these podcasts, you just give all the information away. And I said, you know, we're good. I hope, what if our competitors take it and they put it to practice in their clinics, or they put it to practice in their lives? I mean, this information doesn't belong to us. It just flows through us.
Right.
And so it really belongs to mankind. And I wish that we would spend more time studying human beings and really understanding human physiology, because I don't believe that anything in the human body is what they call idiopathic. I don't think it happens for an unknown reason. I think the majority of disease and pathology that we think happens to us is happening within us. Most of the reason why people are not living at the absolute peak of their existence and not thriving is because there are simple raw materials missing from their body. Simple things: D3, methylated folates, amino acids, just the essential nutrients that the body needs to perform basic functions. You know, if I just picked a nutrient and I was able to magically go into your body and start to deplete it, I could actually predict exactly what symptoms you would have. This is what I did with Dana. I saw critically low levels of vitamin D3. I saw life-threatening levels of triglyceride. And I said, I bet it's very painful for you to bend down and tie your shoes. He freaked out. He was like, how do you know that it's painful for me to tie my shoes? I haven't told my staff. I haven't told my wife. I haven't told anyone that. Because, Dana, you have so much fat in your blood that when you bend down, that pressure pushes it into the end of your capillaries, and it stimulates your nerves, and you feel like the skin's going to peel off your legs. He goes, Gary, I haven't told anyone that. I go, you didn't have to tell me that. And I can see it in your labs. So if we understand human beings, then we can go into their bodies and replace certain raw materials, and they will thrive.
So one is figuring out some sort of deficiency to be able to help the body balance. Second, I guess it's probably a byproduct of that, is to reduce inflammation.
Yes.
And the third is to increase the oxygenation inside the body.
That's it.
Those three things.
Yeah.
So let's get back to oxygen and talk about what can a person do to increase the oxygen going through their body.
Okay, so first let's start with what they can do for nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Somebody just sitting at home wants to be healthier.
Yeah, move your body. I mean, sitting is the new smoking, right? We all know that exercise is good for you, but why is exercise good for you? Because it actually moves oxygen around the body. You know, what I tell people to do is I teach them to a breathwork technique that takes about 4 to 8 minutes every morning. I do it like clockwork. I don't think I've missed a single morning in
What's the
last
foundation of
almost 3 years. Yeah. It's 3 rounds of 30 deep breaths, you know, very, very strong inhales. This is a Wim Hof method. I need to give credit to the man that came up with it. He's the Iceman. He's the founder of breathwork. I do 3 rounds of 30 deep breaths with an exhale hold in between, an inhale hold, and I start again. Because remember that even
if somebody wants to look this up, they just look up the Wim Hof
method. WIMHOF. Yeah. Method.
Got it.
Yeah. And it's just breathing obnoxiously deep for 30 breaths, exhaling and holding and allowing the carbon dioxide to build up, inhaling and holding, letting that air out, and starting again. Elevated emotional states, using the diaphragm to massage the intestines, getting oxygen in and changing the oxygen tension in the tissue. All of this will cost you nothing, and it will skyrocket your mood and your emotional state, and it can rid the body of disease. So breath work is a great one, but for sustained energy and sustained oxygen transport, you need to get your blood tested. Most of us have P&Ls and balance sheets and income statements for our business. We don't have the first idea what's going on in our blood and what's going on in our genetics. And we need a roadmap for our bodies like we have for our business. And I'm not saying you do it through me or my company. There's plenty of great physicians and clinics out there that can do a blood test on you, find out basically where your hormones are, what your nutrient deficiencies are, and how well you're controlling your blood sugar. Those three things will have more of an impact on your lifespan and your health span.
Say it again.
The first thing is to find out how well you're controlling your blood sugar, right? Your glycemic profile, glucose, 3-month average of your blood sugar called hemoglobin A1C, and insulin. Insulin is killing people. As insulin rises and stays sustained and high in your bloodstream, it attacks it's very neurotoxic to the nerves. It's very toxic to the brain. We know now that Alzheimer's and dementia are linked to type 3 diabetes. In fact, we're actually calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes in a lot of circles right now. If you just Google type 3 diabetes, you'll see all kinds of published clinical research linking elevated sugar and insulin resistance in the brain to the early onset of Alzheimer's and dementia. And we have this fallacy built around these diseases that people are losing their memory. That's actually not true. They're losing access to their memory. And access can be restored, right? Your memory is not actually leaving until the tail end of Alzheimer's. The access to the memory is being affected. So if we could reduce our sugars, right? If we could keep sugars low and become more insulin sensitive, that is a marker for longevity. The second thing is we need to correct certain nutrient deficiencies. Big ones are vitamin D3, and B12 are major ones. Zinc and magnesium are the others. And
so first one is controlling your blood sugar.
Control your blood sugar.
Second one is
looking at nutrient deficiency. D3, B12, magnesium, zinc. Yeah. Start with those. I mean, there are hundreds of others. Start with those. D3 is arguably the single most important compound in the human body.
You've said that like 4 times. Why is it such a big deal?
Because we make that vitamin on our own. When God made us, he made us with the ability to make one vitamin. If you look at the second leading cause of morbidity in COVID, it was a clinical deficiency in vitamin D3. 50% of the world's population is deficient in vitamin D3. African-American populations, Latino and darker complected populations are even more deficient in vitamin D3. This is why COVID disproportionately affected minorities, because of the pigment of their skin reducing their vitamin D3 and making them more susceptible to all forms of pathology and disease by reducing their immune system, by compromising the immune system. So supplementing with D3 is a big deal. Huge plus.
So the deficiencies is number 2. Then what's number 3?
And the third is hormone balance.
Hormone balance.
Hormone balance. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. So red blood cells and hemoglobin, these are what transfer. Think of a red blood cell as a tennis ball, and hemoglobin is kind of a fluid that's inside the tennis ball. It's inside that fluid that oxygen's bound, right? So if you're low on red blood cells or you're low on that type of fluid, your body is not transporting oxygen well. So you're tired.
Back to oxygen again.
Back to oxygen. That's why hormone balance leads to positive, healthy levels of red blood cells.
How do you balance hormone?
So you look at your, most physicians can pull a hormone panel. And, on men, you want to look at testosterone, free testosterone, something called luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, a protein called sex hormone binding globulin, but a standard hormone panel that most physicians are very familiar with. And you look at this hormone panel, and when your hormone levels are low, if you talk about a male for a moment, testosterone is low. We have this myth around testosterone that its primary role is male characteristics, which it's not. It's not facial hair or aggression or deep voice or muscles. The primary role of testosterone in men and women is to put pressure on the bone marrow to make more red blood cells. In other words, it's called erythropoiesis. You show me somebody that's deficient in testosterone, I'll show you somebody that's deficient in red blood cells and hemoglobin. So what happens as we age is our hormones start to drop, and as our hormones drop, our blood counts follow. As our blood counts follow, the oxygen chases that, and as the oxygen and all of these things get suppressed, we're susceptible to all forms of pathology and disease. And there are ways that competent physicians can raise testosterone without hormone therapy, and there are ways that you can raise it by taking bioidentical hormone therapy. I'm a fan of both, depending on what your labs say.
And hormones for men and women, yes?
Hormones for men and women. And with women, the ratio of hormones is more important than the levels. You know, if you look at a standard woman and as she goes through her menstrual cycle, it's perfectly normal for estrogen to be in the 400s. It's perfectly normal for it to be in the teens. Progesterone also cycles. So, you know, we can't really use these numbers, these levels to determine whether or not they're deficient. We have to look at the ratio of these things. The body has a certain balance that it tries to stay in. So if we just get information from our blood and we have data and I go, here are my deficiencies, here is where my hormones are off, and here's where I need to control my blood sugar. Just simple amounts of data. We don't even have to make major lifestyle shifts in order to correct the things that are going to steal years from our life, right? And then not only years from our life, but years from the healthy portion of our life, right? God put us on this earth to thrive. We were meant to have the energy of tigers, you know, the libido of a wild bear. We were meant to sleep like babies. We were meant to have a healthy response to exercise, not weight gain, not water retention, not brain fog. We were meant to have clean, clear cognitive function and, you know, high levels of waking energy. And most of the people listening to this podcast right now, I promise you, Eric, they're walking around at about 50 to 55% of their true state of normal. They have forgotten what normal feels because they have no data on their body, and they are supplementing for the sake of supplementing, not for deficiency. So they're throwing things against the wall. They may be perfectly good supplements. When I hear a lot of companies talk about their supplements, I go, I am a huge fan of the supplement that you produce. The question is, does your body need it? The caliber of your manufacturing, the source of your raw materials, the science behind your product, the cleanliness or the FDA inspected facility that you do it in, and then all these GMP certified protocols, that is phenomenal. Does the body need it? And if it does, now you've matched excellence with a deficiency and people can thrive.
See, I want to get to some of the big breakthroughs that are happening in longevity. But before we get there, I want you to give people a roadmap of what they can do on these three areas that are most important, you know, for the listener or the viewer to be able to say, okay, take charge of their life, because I'm super interested for obvious reasons, in longevity.
Yes.
And my first longevity doctor told me, you know, Eric, if you can arrive about 12 years from now, 12 to 14 years, without any major systemic issues, then 120 is a lock. You can make that happen, but you got to get there without, you can't tip into type 2 diabetes, and you got to make sure that you know, like you talked about your, whether it's the oxygen or the hormones or making sure that your D3 and all that stuff is balanced out,
right? All
those different types of things, which I was like excited about by that. You know, you can be vibrant. And he also explained something to me that people don't just slowly wear out over years. They just go to this, you know, to a certain level, and then they just fall off.
That's correct.
Fall straight off.
That's usually what happens.
And he also said that one of the biggest factors for one thing that'll add 10 years to your life is grip strength and muscle mass.
That is so true. Muscle is our metabolic currency. I just posted this today.
Really?
Yes.
Because he said that if you arrive later stages of life without enough muscle mass, muscle mass is very, very important for a vibrant, you know, second half of your life.
No question.
And grip strength, because falling becomes a fatal thing after 75 years old, becomes a fatal, you know, domino effect. People falling, breaking a hip, falling turns into something, turns into something, turns into something.
Yes.
You have the ability to grab yourself, stabilize yourself is a big deal. So I bounced through a few different anti-aging doctors, and it'll sound bougie to say, but it's kind of like a rich person's area. Yeah. You know, you spend a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
Talking with these docs and, you know, being on their protocols and doing these different things and having, you know, connection to all their networks and stuff. I ultimately ended up with you.
Right.
Because I feel like you can help me get to, you know, the next 12 to 14 years. And some of these big technological breakthroughs will kick in and maybe even enhance or
no question
or extend the quality of life even better. I think we're living in a kind of a magical time, or on the verge of a magical time, with all the stuff happening with technology and breakthroughs that are, many of them are already have happened, but aren't through the clinical studies to be able to get to humans. But back to practical. What's a handful of practical things that people can do in order to improve the quality of their life and improve their longevity?
So I'll give you 3 things that everybody could do for tomorrow that would cost them exactly zero. Because, I'm associated with the company 10X Health, and we have fancy light beds that are $120,000, and we have PMF mats that are $5,000. We have a Hypermax oxygen system that's $5,000. But all this equipment is doing is mimicking what we're missing from Mother Nature. And so we get 3 things from Mother Nature. We get magnetism from the earth, we get oxygen from the air, we get light from the sun. And the further we get away from the basics, the less healthy we are. If you think about the last time you had bare feet touching bare soil, I mean dirt, grass, sand, this was the last time that you earthed or grounded. Earthing and grounding is a very real thing. You see, human beings, we build up a charge, right? And if we don't contact the surface of the earth, we don't discharge into the earth. So yes, you can use a PEMF mat, a pulse electromagnetic field mat, which I do, and I know you do, but you can also take your shoes off and contact the surface of the earth, dirt, sand, or grass. Walking on the surface of the earth will actually change the pH in the body. pH stands for potential hydrogen. It's a measure of charge. It's a complete fallacy that you can get alkaline by drinking alkaline water. Right? Alkaline water is not going to change the pH of your blood, but you can get alkaline by contacting the surface of the earth. You can get alkaline by running a low Gauss current through the body, which is what the surface of the earth is, and actually repolarizing all of your cells. It's very, very healthy for you. That's why you feel so good when you go to the beach and you lay on the sand, you get ions from the ocean. You feel amazing because you're getting sunlight, vitamin D3, you're getting salt water and salt air ions from Mother Nature, and then you're actually walking on the sand and you're discharging, you're becoming alkaline. So the second thing is getting safe sunlight. I'm a huge proponent of morning light. If you actually watch my Instagram, every single morning I wake up, and I don't do it to brag, I do it for consistency so that people, if they start following, they'll see, wow, this guy is up with the sun every single day. I was up with the sun here in Las Vegas. I'm staying over at the Red Rock. I came outside. Sun was just coming up. It was beautiful on the mountains. I went out there, did my breath work. There's something very special about first light. It not only resets cortisol and melatonin receptors, but for the first 45 minutes of the day, there's no UVA or UVB rays. And so it's very safe sunlight, but it will still stimulate the production of vitamin D3. The reason why we don't go outside and get sunlight in the morning is because it's too cold or it's too hot. And this is the problem, because aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. We are aggressively pursuing comfort in the modern age. And the more aggressively we pursue comfort, the faster we age. We have got to stop thinking that stress is bad for the body. If you do not load your bones, they will not strengthen. If you don't actually tear your muscle, it won't grow. If you don't challenge the immune system, it will weaken. You're just seeing the worst experiment in the human immune system coming out of the last 2.5 years, because we residential quarantine and we masked and we sequestered human beings from other human contact, and it crushed our natural defense mechanism. So now what are you hearing about? The 4th version of COVID, Omicron, Delta, Lambda, Omicron, all these different variants about monkeypox, and because we had a systemic weakening of the immune system and now we're susceptible. All right. So if we would remember that stress, it's called hormesis. When we stress the body, it responds by strengthening, right? Hormesis and the hormetic response is something that you do to the body, and it responds in a way that actually empowers you. If you get in cold water, for example, yes, you reduce inflammation, but your liver tries to save your life and it releases cold shock proteins. So wake up in the morning, walk on the surface of the earth, get out for first light, and learn to do breath work. Breathe 3 rounds of 30 breaths is what I do while I'm getting first light. And if you can, expose as much of your skin to sunlight as you can. And when you get outside and it's cold, take your shirt off and deal with it. You're not going to die, right? We have got to stop telling grandma not to go outside. It's too hot, not to go outside. It's too cold, to lay down, to just relax, to rest, to eat at the first pang of hunger. This is collapsing our natural defense mechanisms. Hunger is good for you. When we go for prolonged periods without eating, the body actually starts to eat itself, but it starts to eat the portion of yourself that's useless. We eat cells called senescent cells, useless, lazy cells in your bloodstream that are taking up space, not doing anything for you. And when we consume them, they're replaced by healthy, vibrant new cells. You can expose yourself to heat and cold stressors, saunas and cold showers and cold water immersion, right? Because water is 29 times more thermogenic than air when we submerge ourselves in cold water, and that heat floods from our body. Not only are calories leaving our body, but the body's response is to spasm all of the the peripheral blood vessels and force the oxygen into the core, force the oxygen up to the head, the same kind of oxygen pattern we have in deep sleep. And then at the same time, we flood the bloodstream with cold shock proteins. This is free. Everybody's taking a shower. You know why we don't take cold showers? Because we don't want to be uncomfortable. You know, I don't do breath work in the morning because it's too chilly. You know, I don't do breath work in August because it's too hot. And guess what happens? We weaken and we succumb to stress and we reduce our mobility. And we wonder why we have become so sick as a nation while we have sat around pursuing comfort instead of learning to strengthen our body the way we were naturally meant to be challenged.
Wow. I mean, I've got to ask you about it because this is altering my view of how I've responded, because doctors in the past, this is the first time I've heard this, that about the comfort being what did you say?
Aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort.
Aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort, because doctor's saying stress is the biggest thing. You have to avoid stress. So you need to chill.
Worst thing you can do.
No, I understand. But my response is, well, I'm stressed out. I need to chill.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of I'm stressed out, I need to have some exertion.
Yes.
That's not what I've been doing.
Yeah.
I've been like, oh, I need to just go take a nap.
Yep.
Because I'm stressed out. I need to go stare at the wall.
The more stressed you are, the more important it is to strengthen. You know, like when you go to the doctor and they say, get stress out of your life. You're like, okay, how am I going to get stress out of my life? Get a divorce, never talk to my kids again, and quit my job? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like, get everything out of my life that brings me stress.
So the way to get rid of stress is exertion?
The way that we get us the way to not succumb to stress is to strengthen the body. So for example, by stressing yourself, I call it apply a thermogenic stress. So you do 3 things every morning. You breathe, you apply a weight-bearing stress, and you apply a thermal stress. If you do those 3 things every single morning.
So hold on. Breathe for the oxygen.
Breathe for 3 rounds of 30 breaths.
And do some sort of resistance training.
Yeah, resistance training. Yeah, weights or even body weight exercises.
Some sort of resistance training.
Yes, it is complete nonsense that you cannot.
And then hot or cold.
And then hot or cold, extreme hot or extreme cold. An ice cold shower, as cold as you can take it. A hot sauna. I would prefer not a hot shower, but an ice cold shower or a sauna or a cold plunge, right? Or getting outside and exposing your skin to cold temperatures. Right. These not only release sirtuins, which are survival genes, and increase your metabolic rate and force oxygen back to the brain and to the core, and release cold shock proteins, which scour the blood of free radical oxidation, increase the rate of protein synthesis, and they're free. And when you're done challenging your body, you feel amazing on the other side of it. My drug of choice is a 3-minute cold plunge. I'm not kidding you. I mean, and people that are listening to this that actually do cold plunges on a regular basis will tell you.
You planted a virus in my brain now, because, it's like, I don't like the cold plunge.
Everybody hates it. I hate it every time I get in there, but this is a part of seeking comfort.
Yes, I understand. But the seeking comfort thing is very good mental thing, because like I'm stressed out by the thought of it.
Yes.
Right. And I watch like the David Goggins of the world that are just pushing, stress.
I'm not talking about stress yourself to the point where you break.
I understand that.
Right.
But I do kind of appreciate the toughness of it, the strength of it, the mental challenge of it, because I went this completely other way, which is I need to chill. instead of I need to add some resistance
Right.
in different forms. Like
And
my
next-
body has to like react against the cold.
Yeah. The next time you're really stressed out, stand up, walk out of the room, do 3 rounds of 30 deep breaths with a breath hold in between. And if you have access to a cold shower or a cold plunge, get in the cold shower for 3 minutes or into a cold plunge for 3 minutes. Dry off, put your clothes back on, and go back to what you're doing and tell me how you feel.
Really?
Oh my God. I mean, every elevated emotional state that we can feel is nothing more than neurotransmitters bound to oxygen. All the elevated emotional states, passion, elation, joy, arousal, libido, all the hell yeah, I won the lottery emotions, all these emotional states require oxygen as a part of their molecular structure. And where are they being constructed? In the brain with neurotransmitters. So if I can flood the brain with oxygen and I have those neurotransmitters available, I'll reach an elevated emotional state. The reason why no human being has ever woken up laughing, for example, is because we can't wake up laughing because we don't have the oxidative state to experience laughter. We can wake up angry because anger does not require oxygen as a part of its molecular structure. So anger, resentment, despair, jealousy, all of the lower tier emotional states are readily accessible to all of us. But to access elevated emotional states, we don't do this through self-help, motivation, reading, waking in gratitude, journaling. That's not what's going to help you sustain an elevated emotional state. What will help you sustain an elevated emotional state is adequate raw materials in the human body. The neurotransmitters you need to feel that emotional state, number 1, and number 2, adequate levels of oxygen. Breathwork and a cold plunge will do more to elevate your emotional state than any other form of activity.
So grounding,
breathing,
sunlight,
first light,
grounding, first light, cold and hot,
cold
breathing,
showers, breath work,
resistance,
and resistance training.
And
I mean, you know,
what's the quote again? The comfort quote?
Aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. Aging is the aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort.
I'm putting that on my mirror forever.
I promise you, if your morning's hard, your day will be easy. Promise you that. And if you challenge your body, and I'm not talking about extreme challenges, if you expose it to cold, do a little weight bearing exercise, apply a thermal stress, do some weight bearing exercise, do some breath work in the morning, all of which can be done inside of 30 minutes. It will change the entire trajectory of your day. And what you just said about your anti-aging doctor talking about muscle being a huge marker for longevity. Muscle is our metabolic currency, meaning it determines our metabolic rate, which determines how much, our circulation. It determines so many things. It holds the entire skeleton together. It's one of the largest organs that we have. It also determines how much glucose we process and how much sugars we can intake. By applying a thermal stress, applying a physical stress, and learning to breathe, you will change the entire trajectory of your life.
Unbelievable. So this is amazing, and I appreciate everybody for listening and watching.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I got my benefit, so I'm happy. It's funny, these little times when you have a recalibration.
Yeah.
I've had it a few times, even in interviews.
Yes.
When I was like, okay, I heard that everything's changing from that moment. This is one of those moments, so I'm grateful for that. So hold on, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. I got to ask. Yeah, we'll see, right?
Yeah.
I've got to go put it into practice.
Yeah.
And I've got to get my head around, okay, cold plunge is a good thing. Cold plunge is a good thing. Cold plunge is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about what's the most exciting things that are happening in longevity and health in general. What's the great stuff that's going on?
Well, I mean, in general, what we've realized now is that aging is a mitochondrial disease. Meaning, so inside of every cell in your body is a little powerhouse, a little battery called the mitochondria. There's about 110 trillion of these in the body. In fact, 10% of your body weight is something called mitochondria. So human beings are not powered by the food we eat or the air we breathe or the nutrients and the supplements that we take. We're powered by one energy source called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And it's made in this little factory in this little organelle called the mitochondria. So we know now that as the mitochondria becomes progressively less efficient, we age at a faster rate. So the more that we can do to nutrify and supply nutrients to the mitochondria, the more power the cell will have to do its job, eliminate waste, repair, detoxify, regenerate. And so therefore, the longer we will live. We're actually now not just inside the cell, we're through the cytoplasm of the cell into the battery inside the cell called the mitochondria, and even inside the mitochondria into something called the Krebs cycle, an electron transport chain. We're looking at the way that these molecules exchange so we can extend life. There's a lot of research on supplements like NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide, other supplements that raise your NAD levels, nicotinic acid, nicotinamide riboside. This is why people do NAD IVs. So things that actually raise our level of NAD, that actually improve mitochondrial function. Resveratrol, things that actually lengthen telomeres, and again improve mitochondrial function. So the interesting research on longevity, that is reducing sugars, improving waste elimination, repair, detoxification, and regeneration, are really focused inside this little organelle called the mitochondria. A lot of science and a lot of companies are creeping up with really valid supplements that have a positive impact on this tiny little battery in human beings, and it's changing the trajectory of our lives. We're also starting to realize how sick we are becoming from our food supply. I hear people all the time online saying, well, you should be vegan, you should be keto, you should be paleo, you should be this, you should be that. We should be eating a whole food diet, right? I mean, I have vegan patients that are some of the sickest human beings that I have ever cared for in my life. I have meat-eating patients that are some of the sickest human beings that I've ever cared for in my life. And you can make an argument for either, but the best argument is clean, whole foods and without processed foods like preservatives, pesticides, herbicides, insecticides.
Is it difficult to do in the United States? I mean,
it is.
When we go to Europe, we just notice everything's different. The bread's different.
It's not in seed oils. They don't spray it with folic acid.
Yeah.
I mean, in Europe, they have something called day-old bread.
Yeah.
You can walk down the street in France and you look at a bakery and the bread is half off because it's going to expire that night.
Yeah.
You could take a loaf of bread out here and set it on the counter and eat it 12 days later.
Right.
Right. Because it's got so many, seed oils, and most of them are processed.
Mm-hmm.
So, without just going crazy, the basics of nutrition are the further you get from the soil, the less healthy food becomes. So if it's in a wrapper, if it's processed, if it has colors and, if it has colors in it, most foods are not pink and sky blue and
right.
mauve and purple,
right.
chartreuse. These are not things we find in nature. And so eating a whole food diet, obviously grass-fed meats, wild-caught fish, organic fruits, go a long way to improving our health. Also learning to be okay with hunger. Phenomenal things happen to the human body when you apply these stresses. Remember I said there's a term called hormesis. It means I apply a stress and it responds in a positive way, meaning it does something positive for you. So for example, what happens when you're hungry or you intermittent fast? Your body starts to eat useless cells. Your body has time to repair and eliminate waste and detoxify and regenerate and rebuild itself. So when you're hungry, you're focused, you're alert, right? You're actually significantly more aware. Your short-term recall is actually more acute when you're hungry. Mm-hmm. And then what we do is, because it's slightly uncomfortable and we don't want to be uncomfortable, we eat at the first pang of hunger and then we divert all that oxygen.
It's a comfort again.
It's a comfort thing again. We're just stealing from ourselves. We need to place a priority on energy, right? And so if you look at food as whether or not it's going to serve you or steal from you, and you know that certain foods are thieves and they dress up in beautiful suits and pretty cocktail dresses and they are fun colors and they look very enticing, but you're going to let that in to your most important temple and it's going to steal from you. And it happens over and over and over again because we just want that short dopamine ding from that, from that sweet taste. And so we don't ever really get any discipline. Happiness comes from actually being disciplined and being in control of our choices, not walking by a tray full of food and actually knowing that you shouldn't eat it and eating it anyway. It creates that conflict inside you. That lack of discipline creates this conflict. So actually eating poorly serves you poorly and mentally degrades your image of yourself.
Hmm.
And so, when we develop discipline about our morning routines and discipline around our diets, we meet this entire new person that's inside of us, right? It's a healthier, happier, more robust version of you.
Right. Talk to me about stem cells and exosomes. I hear everybody's talking about stem cells and exosomes. You got to go to the Dominican Republic. You got to go to Panama. You got to go to Colombia. You got to, you got to go get all your stem cells. You got to make sure you get your exosomes. You got to make sure you're doing all this other kind of stuff, these IV therapies and everything else.
Right.
Is that a real thing?
It's a very real thing. I mean, stem cells and exosomes here in the United States are, in the legal realm, are used topically. They're used for joints. They're used for, skin, hair, neck, face, décolleté. Also,
What's
in
décolleté?
This area of the neck and
The gobble?
chest. The gobble. So like microneedling procedures and all kinds of topical procedures.
Cosmetic stuff.
Yeah, cosmetic stuff. Dentists are also using them in the mouth now to actually accelerate wound healing. Surgeons are using them when they close wounds to accelerate wound healing. They're still not used intravenously in the U.S., but stem cells are phenomenal. They usually derive from what's called mesenchymal stem cells. They usually come from the umbilical cord. They don't come from babies like most people think. There's a lot of nonsense you hear online that come from aborted babies. They don't. They come from live births where the mother knows her placenta is being donated. And mesenchymal stem cells are capable of differentiating into any cellular structure in the body. There is some mind-numbing research that is published on PubMed now that you can read on stem cells and their impact on all types of diseases. If COVID did anything positive for us, it actually laid the foundation for some of these stem cell therapies and exosome therapies to take a leap forward. And so you have, stem cells, which are cells that contain DNA. They can repair tissue. They can reduce inflammation. They have all kinds of benefits for human beings. And then there's exosomes, which are little packets of information that are released from stem cells. These are about 1/800th the size of a stem cell. They're generally found to be very pro-growth and anti-inflammatory. They're excellent for skin, collagen, elastin, fibrin. They're also excellent for joints, knees, hips, shoulders, rotator cuffs, and inflammatory conditions in joints. That area of medicine to me is one of the most exciting areas of research right now. And yes, the big stem cell clinics and exosome infusion clinics are outside of the United States, mostly run by U.S. trained physicians. And those infusions are being done outside the United States. But there's some promising companies that are pushing their way through the FDA for approvals for certain conditions. And I think you're going to see a new frontier in medicine very soon based around the research on stem cells and their exosomes, their derivatives.
Yeah.
No question.
So let me kind of conclude, and this has been great. It's been very, very helpful and super informative. I still have to digest and listen back a few times to get it solid in my own head. What I'd like you to do is the people listening or watching are probably not at optimum health.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to be the straight talk advisor, giving them honest talk, a wake up call conversation to people like myself that are underperforming what we should be performing, underutilizing the fullness of life, right? Give everybody, including me, some straight talk as far as what they need to do, what the benefits are, and what the consequences are if they don't.
You need two basic pieces of information. Okay. You need a genetic test to tell you what your body converts into the usable form and what it doesn't. It's called a methylation test. Okay. I am not the only one that offers methylation tests. There are a lot of great methylation tests online. You want to get your genetic methylation test. It is a cheek swab. It is a test you do once in your lifetime. And for the balance of your life, you'll never guess what your body's deficient in. You will be astounded what that test can tell you in terms of what your body can process and what it can't. And you can begin to supplement for deficiency rather than the sake of supplementing. The second thing is get your blood tested. Look at your hormones, your blood sugar control, and your nutrient deficiencies. Once you have this information, You have a precise roadmap on what you need to do to feel the best way that you can feel. Otherwise, you're going to be like a one-legged duck swimming in a circle. And if you can't afford to get a blood test done or genetic test done, make that your Christmas savings account that you see. I'm going to give this gift to myself and my family because in the absence of health, you don't have anything. And then tomorrow, I want you to wake up and make a shift. Say, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do 3 things for myself. I'm actually going to start to put myself first because self-love is actually the most selfless thing that you can do. There's a reason why, when a plane depressurizes, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on before you even assist your own child, right? Because you're no use to your family if you're not in good condition. So wake up tomorrow, do 3 rounds of 30 breaths. Wake up with the sun, contact the surface of the earth if you can, and take a cold shower before you get dressed and go to work. And I want you to concentrate and on how you feel after you have just done that little free practice. And I want you to tap into how good your body feels when you're done doing that. And then I want you to make that a habit. Because once you get addicted to that feeling and you're aware of your body, and you get assaulted by sweets and nicotines and alcohols and all of these other choices, they will not seem as empowering as you think they are, right? So that would be my advice to everybody if I was to talk straight.
I love it. Gary, thank you for being my friend.
Welcome.
Thank you for being my human biologist. I have all your stuff. And if you don't have somebody giving you treatment, for viewers out there or listeners out there, 10X Health and Gary's a great solution for you. So I recommend you check it out. Maureen and I, everybody in our family basically is connected to you guys and getting advice and supplements.
Amen.
And hormone therapy.
Great.
From you as well. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Gary Brecka as much as I did. I learned an awful lot, and I'm changing things in my life already. I hope you go do the same. Until next time, this is the Excellence Project. I'm Eric Worre, and I'll see you soon.